Long ago, in a land filled with ancient stories and whispered legends, there lived a man named Jonah. He walked the dusty paths of his village, much like anyone else, but his heart held a special connection to the divine. Jonah was a faithful servant who loved God, and God, in turn, showered him with boundless love. Their bond was a beacon of light in a world often shrouded in darkness. One morning, as the sun painted the sky with hues of gold and rose, God's voice echoed in Jonah's heart, giving him a mission, a task of great importance. "Go," God commanded, "go to the great city of Nineveh. Go there and tell the people to change their ways, to turn from their wickedness and embrace kindness." The people of Nineveh had strayed far from the path of righteousness. They had become mean, their hearts hardened by selfishness and greed. They had forgotten about kindness, compassion, and the simple joys of living in harmony with one another. Their city was a place of discord and unhappiness. God, in his infinite mercy, wanted Jonah to help them turn back to the light, to guide them towards redemption. He yearned for their salvation because he loved them, even in their darkest hour. His love was a constant, unwavering flame. But Jonah was afraid, his heart pounding in his chest. Nineveh was known far and wide for being unfriendly, a place where strangers were met with suspicion and hostility. He worried they'd laugh at him, mock his message, or even hurt him for daring to speak out against their ways. Instead of obeying God's command, instead of embracing his divine purpose, Jonah, in his fear and doubt, made a fateful decision. He decided to run away from God's plan. He hastily packed his bag, filling it with provisions for a long journey. He turned his back on Nineveh and headed in the opposite direction, toward the vast, beckoning sea. He arrived at the bustling port of Joppa, a place filled with the sights and sounds of maritime commerce. There, amidst the maze of ropes and sails, Jonah found a ship preparing to set sail for the distant shores of Tarshish, a place far, far away. He approached the captain and, with a nervous hand, paid for a ticket, hoping to secure his escape. With a mix of relief and trepidation, Jonah hurried aboard the ship, eager to leave his troubles behind. He sought refuge deep in the ship's hold, hoping to disappear into the shadows and escape the weight of his conscience. He settled into his hiding place, thinking he could escape God's call, that he could outrun his destiny. In that moment, Jonah felt clever, perhaps even a little proud of his plan. But the truth is, you can never really run from God's love, from his watchful gaze, from his divine purpose. As the ship set sail, leaving the familiar coastline behind, Jonah tried to forget about Nineveh, about the faces of its people, and his divinely appointed mission, the task he had so readily abandoned. But deep down, in the quiet corners of his heart, he knew he was running from something important, something that would ultimately shape his destiny. The sea sparkled under the warm sun, its surface shimmering like 1,000 diamonds. The boat rocked gently on the waves, lulling some of the passengers into a peaceful slumber. And Jonah, in his self-imposed exile, hoped his worries would simply disappear, washed away by the vastness of the ocean. Yet God's love is everywhere, a constant presence, an unwavering force. No matter how far you go, no matter how hard you try to hide, Jonah's journey, though born of fear and disobedience, was just beginning. And despite Jonah's attempts to escape, God had not forgotten him, nor had he abandoned his plan. Even as Jonah tried to hide from his responsibilities, from his calling, God's plan, like the relentless tide, was still unfolding, moving towards its inevitable conclusion. Sometimes, the hardest things we face, the challenges that seem insurmountable, are the most important, the ones that teach us the most valuable lessons about ourselves and the world around us. And Jonah, in his flight from duty, was about to learn that lesson in the most profound way imaginable, in a way he never expected, a way that would test his faith and ultimately lead him back to his true purpose. The ship sailed away, and Jonah watched the land fade into the distance. He felt relief at first, thinking he'd escaped his task, but guilt crept in, heavy and hard to ignore. Every creak of the boat and splash of the waves reminded him, "You're going the wrong way, Jonah." He tried to hide from his feelings, curling up in the dark bottom of the ship. Sleep came, but it brought no peace. Only dreams of God's sad face and the people of Nineveh. Jonah was far from home, but even farther from peace. He was running from God, but he couldn't outrun his own heart. Alone in the darkness, Jonah realized he couldn't hide forever. God hadn't forgotten him. Something big was about to happen. Jonah's journey was about to take a wild turn. As Jonah slept soundly, oblivious to the world around him, the ship sailed on, cutting through the calm waters. The gentle rocking of the vessel was a lullaby, easing him into a deeper slumber. But the tranquility was not to last. The sky, once a clear blue, began to darken ominously. Dark storm clouds gathered on the horizon, swirling and churning with a menacing energy. The wind picked up, howling like a hungry wolf, a stark warning of what was to come. Soon the storm unleashed its full fury. Waves like monstrous, watery mountains crashed over the ship, each impact threatening to tear it apart. The vessel groaned and creaked under the immense pressure. The ship was tossed about like a mere toy in a bathtub, completely at the mercy of the raging sea. It pitched and rolled violently, threatening to capsize with every passing moment. The sailors, utterly terrified by the sheer power of the storm, clung to anything they could find, their faces etched with fear. They tried everything they knew to save the boat, battling against the wind and waves, desperately hoping to weather the storm. Ropes snapped, sails tore, and the deck became a treacherous battleground. But their efforts were in vain. The storm only grew fiercer, its intensity escalating with each passing moment. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the scene with an eerie, blinding light. In their desperation, they cried out to their gods, pleading for salvation, but their prayers seemed to vanish into the howling wind. Nothing worked to calm the tempestuous sea. The captain, in a frantic search for answers, stumbled upon Jonah asleep below deck, seemingly undisturbed by the chaos above. Enraged, the captain shook Jonah awake and shouted, "Get up! Pray to your God! Maybe he will save us!" Jonah woke with a start, disoriented and confused, only to be met with the terrifying reality of the raging storm. As the situation became clear, a chilling realization washed over him. The storm was no accident. It was a direct consequence of his disobedience. The storm was his fault. Desperate to understand the cause of their misfortune, the sailors cast lots, a sacred method of divination, to find the one responsible for bringing the storm upon them. With bated breath, they watched as the lots were cast and the finger of fate pointed directly to Jonah. A hush fell over the deck as all eyes turned to him, a mixture of fear, anger, and accusation in their gazes. With a heavy heart, Jonah confessed, "I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. I'm running away from him, trying to escape his will." The sailors were shocked and desperate, their faces etched with disbelief and fear. "What should we do to you?" they asked, their voices trembling with anxiety. Knowing what he must do, Jonah answered with a somber tone, "Throw me into the sea, and the storm will stop raging against you. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you." Unwilling to condemn a man to certain death, the sailors, with renewed determination, tried to row back to land, hoping to escape the storm's grasp. But their efforts were futile. The storm raged on with undiminished fury, its power seemingly insurmountable. With no other choice left, and with heavy hearts, they prayed for mercy to the Lord, the God of Jonah, begging for forgiveness for what they were about to do. And with a final, desperate act, they threw Jonah overboard, casting him into the churning depths of the stormy sea. Instantly, as if by divine intervention, the sea grew calm, the wind ceased its howling, and the waves subsided. The sailors were amazed by the sudden transformation, their hearts filled with awe and reverence. Jonah's secret was out, and the power of his God had been revealed. Jonah plunged headfirst into the churning abyss. He was swallowed by the cold, swirling sea, the waves crashing over him like mountains of water. The ocean's fury was relentless. As he sank deeper and deeper, he thought with a growing sense of dread that this was surely the end of his story. He gasped for air, but only found salt water. But even in the darkest depths, God had another plan, a lifeline in the unlikeliest of places. Out of the inky blackness of the depths came a giant fish, a creature of immense size and power, sent by God to intercept Jonah's descent. With a huge, cavernous gulp, the fish swallowed Jonah whole, pulling him from the jaws of death and into its own strange living prison. Inside the dark, slimy belly of the giant fish, Jonah was utterly scared and completely alone, surrounded by the unknown. He realized, with a chilling certainty, he couldn't run from God's all-encompassing love, not even here, in the belly of a fish. For 3 long, agonizing days and nights, Jonah sat trapped in the fish's belly, thinking deeply about his life, and praying with newfound sincerity. He remembered the arrogance that led him to try and hide, and the unwavering grace with which God had saved him from certain death. Jonah prayed, his voice echoing in the fish's stomach. "Thank you, God, for hearing my desperate plea. I promise with all my heart, I will do what you ask of me." Jonah's heart underwent a profound change in the suffocating darkness of his confinement. He finally stopped running and turned his face back to God, seeking forgiveness and guidance. Even in the strangest, most unlikely place imaginable, God's unwavering love found him, reaching into the depths of despair. Jonah learned a powerful truth. You can never truly hide from God's watchful care and boundless compassion. The fish waited patiently, faithfully following God's divine plan, a vessel of redemption. Jonah was finally ready, humbled and transformed for a second chance to fulfill his purpose. After 3 days, God spoke to the fish. The fish swam up toward the light. With a giant bleck, it spat Jonah onto the sandy shore. Jonah lay on the beach, covered in seaweed, but alive. He breathed in the fresh air, grateful for a second chance. The sun felt warmer, the sky looked brighter. Jonah's heart was full of thankfulness. He knew God's love was bigger than any mistake. God's forgiveness was deeper than the sea. This time, when God's voice came, Jonah listened. "Go to Nineveh," God said. Jonah didn't hesitate. He got up and started walking. He was ready to do what God asked, no matter how hard. Jonah turned his back on fear and ran toward his mission. He was God's messenger, ready to share hope. Jonah's journey had changed him forever. Jonah walked until he reached the gates of Nineveh. The city was huge and busy, just as he'd imagined. But Jonah was not afraid anymore. He marched into the city and shouted God's message. "In 40 days, Nineveh will be overthrown." To his surprise, the people listened. From the king to the children, everyone felt sorry for their actions. The king ordered everyone to pray and turn from their mean ways. The whole city hoped for God's mercy. God saw their changed hearts and forgave them. Nineveh was given a second chance, just like Jonah. God's love reached everyone, even those who seemed far away. Jonah's message had made a difference. Jonah's story shows us that no one is too far for God's love. Even when we run, God never gives up on us. Jonah learned that God's forgiveness is for everyone. The people of Nineveh learned it too. When we turn back, God welcomes us with open arms. Jonah's journey was hard, but it brought hope to a whole city. God's love is bigger than our mistakes. He gives second chances to all who ask. And just like Jonah, we can share that love with others. The end, or maybe just the beginning.